we are in this series of thankfulness during what? 2020? I mean, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, and it's been weird. 2020 has been a very strange year, and honestly, sometimes there might have been some doubt here and there, and that's what we shared and talked about last week. And this week, we're looking at thankfulness or being thankful during loss. Now, loss doesn't have to just simply be a physical loss. I mean, there's a lot of loss that I feel like we've been able to know and feel during 2020. For us personally, Sam and I, there's been times that it felt like we really lost a lot from our original wedding plans. The original wedding ceremony that we were hoping to have with lots of family and friends, and well, the celebration didn't take place the way we thought it was going to. Now, we were glad of how it took place anyways. It came around to be just right, and we were able to be reminded of what this ceremony truly meant for us. But there are times that it still felt like we were going through a grieving process of realizing it also just didn't happen the way we thought it was going to. And it was smaller than we thought it was going to. And then also for a while, for me, it was graduation. It was weird, and it felt like I had a loss of not actually getting to have a graduation ceremony. Originally, we were going to have a little party afterwards with some of my classmates and friends, and we were going to be able to enjoy that time to catch up. And, well, when COVID hit, then, of course, a lot of graduation plans completely changed. That didn't even happen until September, and then some of the party plans didn't even get to happen the way that we were hoping. So, I mean, that's personally some of the loss that I was going through in 2020. And I know that I had heard about, and I kept thinking about the high school seniors that, I mean, that's their year, high school dances, prom and homecoming, like that felt like a loss. And honestly, for quite a bit of us, there was kind of still a grieving process. Right now, it's been hard not getting to hang out with friends and getting to see family like we want to. And so it's like, oh my goodness, that feels like another loss. We had a loss of events. You know, there's not really any concerts going on right now. And it's like, oh, I missed that. Like, I want to be able to hang out again with a group of friends and catch up. And so I know quite a few of us are feeling that as well. Holidays look so different this year. 4th of July didn't get to happen the way it normally happens. Downtown Jeff City for 4th of July, very, very limited on what we did. And then Thanksgiving this year looks different. Some aren't even having it this year. Living windows downtown for Christmas. Oh no! Sam and I haven't been able to do that for quite a few years. We haven't been here for Living Windows, and we're like, oh, we're going to be here this year. That's going to be great. And then, that's last I heard. I know they were changing all the Living Window things. I don't know if they're doing it or just limiting it, or if it's spanned out. I thought I heard something about it being spanned out in the week, but looks different. Christmas, of course, that's going to look different. So those are just some of the losses. But then, we also still had some people were losing their jobs. Maybe it was one of your spouse. I mean, maybe it was your spouse. Maybe it was your friend. A parent lost their job. Maybe a child lost their job. I mean, we've seen people go through almost that kind of grieving process also. And so it's not just a physical loss of life. Loss looks like many different ways. And so I just wanted to show that it's not just, it's not just the first thing that always comes to mind. And I think that while we're coming to Thanksgiving and we're thinking about thankfulness during 2020, and what feels like for some people, they said we just kind of lost an entire year, which is kind of weird too. But during this, it's like, man, honestly, we have gone through a lot. And some of us may honestly have felt lost during 2020 as well. Like that fog, which I think most of us have gone through this year. It's hard to see forward what's coming up ahead. And as people who follow Christ, the question that I'm wanting us to think about is, how did we respond or react through these moments of loss? And honestly, probably we went through some kind of grieving process. And that's okay. Actually, that's good. That's normal. That's a part of life. If we're going to be going through any kind of loss, Sam and I did have to kind of go through a different form of a grieving process with our wedding ceremony. With graduation, hanging out with friends. There is still a grieving process through any kind of loss that we go through. So I don't want to downplay that as well. But yet, I also want us to recognize there is some major loss that some people have actually gone through this year due to the loss of a family member, neighbor, maybe co-workers or spouses of co-workers. I mean, there has been some actual loss that we have gone through, and that grieving process is very real. We don't want to downplay that. Matthew 5, verse 4, was in the Beatitudes, and I was just being reminded of, yeah, of course, like, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Christ is there to comfort us, and yet, as the body of Christ, we are here to comfort one another during the time of loss, while we mourn. In Ecclesiastes, it was talking about there's a time for everything, and then in chapter 3, verse 4, it said there is a time to weep, and there's a time to laugh. There is a time to mourn, and then there's a time to dance. And so we realize that, yes, there are going to be moments, there are going to be seasons where loss is very real. We can't just neglect it or pretend that it didn't happen. And then, of course, I was thinking about Jesus with his friend Lazarus, and Jesus wept too for him. He wept with Mary and Martha, and he didn't downplay the grieving process, though he still had hope in what was to come. And so John 11:32 through 36 was saying, "Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit." Some say he had great compassion and was greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. And so the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" Jesus was right there through the pain, through the grieving process. And honestly, going through these stages actually become a part of our testimony. So, how are we handling 2020? That will become a part of our testimony. How we saw Christ in our life through these times will become a part of our testimony. And guess what? Testimony is powerful. So today we're going to listen and hear 3 testimonies, 3 stories of, honestly, I can't imagine the kind of loss that they went through. In one of these, I was actually in a play. It was my first and only play so far, but I was in this play, and it was called The Hiding Place. And that only gave a glimpse of the kind of loss that was taking place during World War II while the Nazis were coming in to kill the Jews. And it's crazy. Corrie ten Boom is the author of The Hiding Place, and she personally went through this. And she was born in 1892 in the Netherlands, and she was a Dutch watchmaker family, and so they were all watchmakers. And so people were coming in and out of their shop and their home all the time, which made for a perfect opportunity in 1940 when World War II broke out and the Nazis were seeking to kill Jews. Well, this Christian family cared about people. they knew that these people were still loved by God, and they wanted to take care of these people who were going to be killed or taken to these concentration camps. And so Corrie ten Boom's father starts making their home a place of refuge, a place that these Jews could come in and hide from the Nazis, or the Gestapo, as they were saying, to protect them, a place of refuge. And during the time, they actually had about 800 Jews come into their house throughout the years. There's about 800 different Jews that had come in, out maybe just for a couple hours, just to see if it was a place they wanted to be, or they had moved on to a different place of refuge. But this family wanted to help. Well, 4 years later, after World War II started, in 1944, one of the citizens in the city had told the Gestapo about the Ten Boom family keeping all these refugees. And so the Gestapo came in and they had arrested a bunch of people. They had arrested 35 people, including all of the Ten Boom family. And now the Ten Boom family would be placed in these concentration camps with the Jews in very harsh conditions. In fact, Dad was not doing well either, and so he did pass away pretty quickly. Corrie and her sister, they were actually together for quite a bit of the time in these camps, and it was crazy to see how they tried to encourage one another through this time. But a little bit later, Corrie's sister, Betsy, she didn't make it. And Corrie was right there beside Betsy while she was dying. And Corrie dealt with the loss of all of her family, not knowing where they went to, trying to go through that kind of grieving process. They lost their home. They lost friends. Her life was as if it was gone. Everything was taken away from her, as it seemed. And Corrie is an amazing testimony of somebody who lost it all and continued to find Christ with her through it all. There's a few quotes that she had said that I wanted us to hear today. And it baffles me, the kind of faith that she had to find Christ during these times. So the one quote she said is, "You can never learn that Christ is all you need until Christ is all you have." When everything else is taken away, you realize, you're right. Christ is all I really needed. That was one of her quotes. Another one I love, it's an amazing one. She said, "When a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off. No, you sit still and trust the engineer." She's saying even though things were becoming so dark, she knew that God was still doing something. God was still there. She knew that she wasn't left alone. Another one she has said is, "In darkness, God's truth shines most clear." I mean, think about that. In the dark night, maybe in your room or outside or whatever. I mean, if there is a little glimmer of light, you can see that light so clear, you know exactly where it's coming from. During the day, that light, I can't even honestly see it. If it's a little itty bitty glimmer, it's completely washed out by all the other. And so she's saying, in darkness, God's truth shines most clear. It is so clear who God is and what He is and what He's doing. Sorry, scratch the last part. It's clear of who His character is and His nature and His everlasting love with us through it all. We can trust the engineer. And then finally, that's what she says basically. She says, with Jesus, even in our darkest moments, the best remains and the very best is yet to be. And it's crazy, at some point, Corrie came to the point of even forgiving the Nazi soldiers that had killed her family. Even specifically the soldier who had taken lives right in front of her. She had come to the point through Christ to be able to forgive them. And she lived to tell her testimony until her 91st birthday, April 15, 1983, when she also passed away, 91 years later. But that's not the only story. That's not the only testimony. When I was looking through in the Old Testament, there's this book called Lamentations. Oh my goodness. You can walk right alongside this author and hear and feel the hurt that this author was going through. So I'll paint the picture real quick. And Jerusalem was becoming a mess, okay? And the enemies came in, rushing into Jerusalem, and destroyed everything that they loved, their homes. And this author of Lamentations is going through the grieving process. Let's bring this home a little bit more, just so we can really try to picture what he was going through. Could you imagine Jeff City, our beloved city, our beloved capital? It has a lot of history behind it, being attacked. And then our capital and other buildings around, our churches, our city buildings, them falling to the ground in rubble. I think we'd go through a grieving process. It would hurt. A lot of confusion. And I think through those moments is when we would be crying out to God, saying, what is going on? Let's look at Lamentations chapter 1, verse 1 through 3, just to get a picture of what he is going through. He's talking about Jerusalem as she. It's so personal. It's so beloved. So when we go through and it says she, he's talking about this nation. So verse 1. How she sits alone. The city once crowded with people all over. She who was great among the nations has become like a widow, left alone. The princess among the provinces has been put to forced labor, taken from her high place. She weeps bitterly during the night with tears on her cheeks. And there is no one to offer her comfort. Not one from all her lovers. See, so many nations had loved Jerusalem. He's saying not one of them offers her comfort. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile following affliction and harsh slavery, and she lives amongst the nations but finds no place to rest. All her pursuers have overtaken her in narrow places. Backed her up in a corner. I mean, that's the kind of picture. The people of Jerusalem just lost their lands to their enemies. This was heartbreaking, seeing what the nation was and how no one will be coming to the glory of Jerusalem now. It's torn down. There's nothing for somebody to come and see in awe. It felt like everything was taken away. Their homes were gone, and even the temple was now destroyed. And yet, then this author shares in the midst of this loss a hope that comes to mind. So chapter 3, halfway through his lament, in verse 21 through 24, it's something that quite a few of us have heard before. But he says, "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. His hope is realizing that the steadfast, everlasting love remains, doesn't cease. His mercies do not come to an end. Even in the midst of loss that we're going through, Christ remains with us. God remains with us through the pains and the loss that we go through. And that provides hope, just like us going through the dark tunnel on a train. And we trust the engineer. See, for him, he remembers God's steadfast, everlasting love. And when I read through Lamentations, I basically saw the grieving process taking place. I mean, he is going through the shock of losing their beloved nation. There is some anger that he directs at the nation for the crazy sin that they were participating in and the people. He goes through a lot of heartache. The fact that, well, their beloved nation was lost and the temple was destroyed. And then he accepts what happened, starting in chapter 3. And while he accepts what happens, he starts to look forward, realizing God's steadfast love never ceases. He realizes life will still go on, and he'll continue by the hope he has in God's steadfast love, because his mercies begin anew every day. One of the commentaries had said, it's hope, not despair. No, the final word in Lamentations is hope. That's a testimony. To read through Lamentations and to realize by the end, it's a message of hope through this testimony. The last testimony that I was looking at was with this book that I've been reading a little bit. It's called Among the Ashes, and it's William J. Abraham. And he had lost his 42-year-old son in 2013. His son's vital organs had completely collapsed, and later they found out it was caused by hepatitis. And after many prayers, his son died about 9 days later after he was put into the hospital. But William felt like 2 other prayers were still answered. William wanted to see Timothy, that was his son. William wanted to see Timothy at the hospital before he passed, because William was out in a different country actually at the time. And so he was able to actually make it back in time to see his son. Prayer number 1 was answered. Second prayer that he had was that he just wanted his son to be able to wake up for just a short period of time from his induced coma, just long enough for William to tell his son again how much he loved him. That prayer was also answered. And yes, like I said, later Timothy did pass, and William began that grieving process. In the foreword of that book, Nicholas Wolterstorff actually summarizes William's experience by saying, emulating Job in living with assurance and hope, but without explanation. He goes later to say, though we live without explanations, we nonetheless have ground for hope. And that was something that William was going through, and he's still a professor of the Word, but he was still going through the grieving process, even though he was so close to God's Word, His truth. The grieving process was still there. A question that I think sometimes we may need to go through 2020. Again, those are testimonies that I can't even imagine trying to go through. For most of us, 2020 has not looked like many of these testimonies. But for us, through any of the trials and any of the loss that we have gone through in 2020, I think Thanksgiving is coming up. A question that I had heard this past week, it was so cool. Over in Israel, they have this phrase called, or they ask the question saying, what is my word in the wilderness? The reason why it's so cool is because in the Hebrew, word is dabar, and wilderness is so closely related to it, it's midbar. So I'll say it again. According to the Hebrew, it would basically be saying, what is my dabar in the midbar? And Christy McLennan had shared that during one of her kind of podcast interview times. But I thought that was so awesome. So I'll ask again. Through this time of 2020, what is your word in the wilderness? What is God trying to share with us during this time? In times of darkness, as Corey ten Boom was saying, the truth, the light of Christ is revealed and shines so clear. So for us, honestly, we can have thankfulness during loss. Why? Because we have hope. It's what Lamentations found. We found steadfast love. That's the truth. So as we summarize, yes, go through the grieving process. Do not cheat that part in life. It is so necessary, and honestly, we will find Christ through those times because of his everlasting, steadfast love. And for us as his body, we can continue to do that for each other. So walk through the grieving process together. And ultimately, during 2020, please continue to tell God everything. Tell God everything. Your hurt, your pain, your discomfort, your confusion, frustration, lost, whatever the grief you've been going through in 2020. Tell that to God. He is there with us through it all. We can tell each other as well as his body. You know, I'm reminded that it's when we're honest with God, when we cry out to him, that we will be thankful he's been here. We'll be thankful that he's been here with us through our loss. So then, how are we thankful during our loss? Well, we'll be thankful that he has been faithful with his everlasting love toward us through the loss, even through 2020. And you know, I think that just like a best friend who has gone through the highs and lows with you, you guys grow a stronger relationship, a friendship, deeper than you ever had before those times. That's the same with our God. When we are with him through these moments, the intimacy of our relationship with God will grow more than we could have ever imagined. It's just like Corey was saying, when you never know how much you need Christ until Christ is all you have. And I think that's so true. So for us, I'll just say it one last time. We can be thankful during loss. Why? Because we have hope through God's everlasting love with us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, you've been here with us through all of our life, and we're being reminded that you've been with us through 2020, the past couple of months, past couple of weeks, and today. And you will continue to be with us through whatever we go through. There are times to celebrate, and there are times to mourn. And right now we're just recognizing we may have some loss that we need to mourn through. So God, I want each of us to be able to invite you into our grieving process through anything that we're going through. We'll be thankful that you've been with us through it all, and that you continue to give us hope because of your everlasting love that you showed on the cross, that you went all the way. You went all the way for us because you love us. Your everlasting love remains constant. And that gives us hope. That gives us hope, and I hope and pray that that will be made firm and understanding in our hearts, that we will fully trust that truth of who you are. So we thank you for this time. We are thankful for the scars, because through them we know who you are. We thank you for revealing yourself, that you are the good shepherd with us, no matter if we have lost things or if we have felt like we have become the lost sheep. You are the good shepherd who has run after us when we cried out. Thank you for being the best friend we could ever have. May we continue to share this with other people as well,